Check 1, 2. Are you hydrating for your race this weekend?
Check 1, 2, June 3rd, 2021. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We are episode 483. Welcome aboard. It's a nasty day here in Chattanooga. It is rainy and gross and
humid,
stormy.
man.
I've
just been hot all morning. I had to go change.
Well, if you're complaining that it's humid, why'd you open the garage doors? It's not humid inside
I
here.
didn't say I was always logical, man. I just wanted some circulation.
I had the AC going here this morning because I got on the bike early for my long ride of the week, and then I got out of the shower. I'm like, all right, I'm going to cool off a little bit. The AC is still down for us, which is a pretty cool 74. And then I got out of the shower, and you've like got the AC off and the doors open, and it's like muggy and raining. I'm like, what are you doing right now? You complain about it being muggy, and you got the summer air, the humidity and the dew point seeping into the hub.
Haven't you ever been desperate for like an answer? And I felt like it was just
pulling
like,
at strings. You're just like,
the air felt heavy when I got in here. I looked at you, and you looked like you just came through a 15-round battle with
dude.
Tyson.
I didn't look that bad after my ride, did I?
Woo! I mean, in the most satisfied, good I just got crushed sort of way. But I was glad to see it because I've been harping lately on the whole. If you want to get faster on the bike, you got to really work these during the week structured rides, and it sounds like you did, my man.
I didn't today. I have another structured hard ride tomorrow, but today was just was long with 3 hours endurance. No intervals, just steady saddle time. Nothing crazy, and that I think I was more mentally like I'm done with this, like I'm ready to go off the bike. But I saw it through. I finished up my 3 hours. I was done. We hope you finish out this podcast. We'll get it started here now. If it's your first time tuning in,
started.
Yeah, seriously, it kind of already started. Welcome. We appreciate you tuning in and giving us your time. We know we have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. That we know that your time is valuable. So thank you for tuning in. It's just life. That's right. We have 482 other podcasts that Mike does a really awesome job outlining the specifics of the podcast. You can kind of see the bullet points and all of the descriptions. You can pick and choose. You can go in order. It's probably best that you kind of work your way backwards, because if you start at the beginning, you may not listen anymore, because I can't imagine our earlier podcasts were really all that great. I'm afraid to go back and listen. People
that are into bands early, and then they get too polished.
They get too polished, and they're like, God, they're flipping the shark. Hey, we don't want to flip the shark, which is an old school.
Only thing we've polished up maybe is the sound a little bit.
Yeah,
but
we haven't done like anything spectacular. So if you're looking for something spectacular today, you're probably not going to get it. We're not experts. We're not professionals. We're just best friends, coaches, and athletes ourselves. We've been doing this for a very long time. I've been racing and coaching for 15 plus years. Mike himself for 7 or 8, and so that's kind of what we do. We just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through. Training and racing wise, and just life, because that's what it is. Our podcast is a whole lot of triathlon, a whole lot of life, everything in between, how they can complement each other, how they can take away. We'll do race recaps, we'll do race previews, have on the very rare guests, but for the most part, we just take the pulse of our community, we take the pulse of the athletes that we're working with across the world, and use that to drive the conversation. And that I think is what we're going to kind of touch on lightly. At the beginning of today's podcast, we had a request from one of our. If you want to be part of the conversation, that group, you can find it on Facebook. A lot of awesome people in there, but it's Crushing Iron Group. That's on Facebook. You can hop in there and answer one simple question, and we'll let you in. But we had. I want to find it because I want to give. I think it was from maybe.
Well, before we get into that, I always forget that your schedule is usually a little bit different. I mean, you sort of do longer stuff during the week more often than most, probably, right? So.
Except for my long run, I try to get my long ride done during the week because I try to spend as much time with Hayden as I can on the weekends. When I'm home.
So this morning I was running a little bit behind, and I almost texted you because I was feeling the stress. I'm like, dang it, because I had to go to the store, and then I got in there, I got up to the counter, I had all this stuff that we got from the grocery store, and I got there, and the lady's like, "We're only taking cash today," and I'm like, "Oh, what? Yeah, their whole system was down, hacked." Everybody's hacking everything. They're hacking the Food King. What's it called?
The Food King? No idea.
No, my place down here.
Oh, the Food City.
Food City.
Yeah.
Hopefully not hacking Food City. But anyway, had to wait in line for the ATM, and then for some reason that works, but their credit card system doesn't work. But then I was going to text you, and then I came in, and you're actually just getting done, and I was a little behind. I'm like, oh. So I didn't feel as bad is the point.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't.
You probably would have been happy to get a text, say, hey, I'm a little behind. You're like, yeah. I'm finishing up my ride. Bro.
Finish up my ride. I mean, getting shit done.
Yeah. And I'm at Food City buying chips.
Yeah. At least it's not cookies in the back.
I had to get butter for my coffee, and I get some chips.
I wonder how that guy's doing these days, Mr. Bulletproof.
Oh, he's crushing it.
But Emily Ann in our closed group this morning, and I'm kind of hesitant to even go into this because let me just read out. Emily Ann in our closed group, which is Crushing Iron Group on Facebook, says, "I want to know Mike and Robbie's thoughts on the quote unquote Iron Cowboy doing 100 full Ironman in 100 consecutive days." This is one of those topics that I put people's allegiance or non-allegiance to Iron Cowboy somewhere right in between politics, religion, and diet.
Yeah.
Like it is up there in like just kind of those like areas that you just don't really talk about at the dinner table. You don't talk about your opinion on the Iron Cowboy because people are vehemently opposed and think that what he's doing is so overrated, or you people who will staunchly support him and basically blindly support all things Iron Cowboy because he is quote unquote the Iron Cowboy. Let me just say this first and foremost. I've never been a huge fan of people who give themselves their own nicknames. I just can't. Like I
see that coming.
I think what he's done in a lot of ways is insanely incredible. But I just always have a thing about people who are like, yeah, they call him Storm. Like, did someone nickname him that? No, that's just
T-Bone.
what he calls himself. Like, he calls himself Storm and T-Bone. He calls himself T-Bone. Really? Where'd you get that nickname? No, just kind of came up with the man in 6th grade and just kind of stuck around. I'm like, well, why did it stick around? Well, because I haven't told anybody my real name, so everybody just calls me T-Bone. Like, that's...
You remember T-Bone? George Costanza?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, man.
So,
what do you want for lunch, George? I think I'll have a T-Bone. And then... I think I'll have a T-bone too.
I think I'll have a T-bone too. So anyway, this guy named James, I don't remember his last name, but he just, I think, apparently just completed doing the distance of an Ironman triathlon 100 consecutive days. We did 100 in 100 days. Which and I told you this before we went on air, that, you can, in my opinion, you can argue I wasn't a fan of the first whatever thing he did because I'm sorry, but you can't say you did the full distance if you do it on the elliptical. That's just, you need to put a big asterisk behind that. This one, I think while the physical feat of what he did for exercising 100 days in a row for how long he did it is incredibly spectacular, honestly, from a physical standpoint. But I think what he accomplished mentally and emotionally far supersedes what he was able to do physically. You can argue which way you want about, did he really do the distance? Yes, he covered the distance. Did he? And to be honest, I know a lot of people were poo-pooing on Ironman for like telling him to quit calling him Ironman, distance triathlons. And you can listen, like James is also very good at marketing. The day after, 2 or 3 days after he posted his little cease and desist order from Ironman on his Facebook page and got all these people riled up about being anti-Ironman, he just so also happened to start promoting his own race series with Norseman like 3 days later. So let's not be naive to the fact that there was a little bit of marketing in there to his own accord, not so much bashing of Ironman. But what I don't have a problem with, and we'll get into his, like the physical feat of it, and just maybe talking about what the human body and the human mind is capable of, is that I don't have a problem with people saying it wasn't an Ironman distance triathlon, because if you go do an Ironman distance triathlon, you don't get to do it in a pool. You don't get to do it stopping. You don't get to do it with floaty pants on. You don't get to then take, do your own transition and maybe get some IV fluids. And you don't get to go draft behind 30, 40 cyclists to cover 112-mile bikes. I didn't really understand like the depth in which how far back he was until he uploads his file, and he was doing like a 5.5 hour bike split for 112 miles with pushing like 120 watts. For like a guy his size, that's like 40% of what you normally would push in a race, which is basically like, so to give you an example, it's like the guys in the very, very, very back of the peloton, the Tour de France, you think are like barely like pedaling, but also going like 30 miles an hour because you have this huge draft. You can't do that in Ironman triathlon. And then he obviously has to cover his own distance with support, which from what I saw on all of the things that he covered, or the distances that he covered, he walked for the majority of the marathon. So I don't have a problem with Ironman being like, you didn't do one because, you technically didn't. Like, you can't draft for behind 40 or 50 people every time. I think.
Were any of them? Well, of course not.
He didn't do any of them alone. He had like big group of people.
But were any of them
fly
actually in
in.
Ironman? I guess there wouldn't have been any races he could have done, right?
I think
he did that before, right?
I think he tried
Jumped in a few or something.
Yeah, something like jumped in a few, but that'd been a whole different story. Is like if you did it all solo, no drafting, none of that, open water swim every day, not in a pool, not wearing your floaty pants. But that's neither here nor there. I think the feat in of itself, getting up 100 days in a row to go out and exercise for 14 to 16 hours is insane to me. Again, while I think what he did physically is just really kind of mind-blowing, you can argue down the road what that's probably going to end up doing to his body. But I think just the actual physical feat, while it's incredible, the mental and emotional feat I find even more impressive. The willingness and the ability to get up for 100 days in a row and cover that distance, knowing what you have to do, right? Knowing what the distance you have to cover, knowing that it's not just like tomorrow, but it's the next day, 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 is incredible to me. And it is something that I have zero desire to even entertain the thought of doing even 2 in a row. It's just one of those things that you can't, it's mind blowing. And I think very impressive from a mental and emotional standpoint. Obviously, do I think there are probably hundreds of other people on this planet that could probably do the same thing the way he did it? I do. From an athletic standpoint, you could probably take every single pro triathlete on the planet and slow them down some and have groups that could probably cover 100 days in a row. Physically, could they do it or want to do it mentally and emotionally? Probably not, which I think is the most insane thing to me.
Well, I got to be honest. I can't even guarantee that I've been up 100 straight days before noon. You know what I mean?
I can vouch for that.
So, like, for me, it's just like, yeah, like you're saying, it's a mental feat. But, I mean, even physically, it's just like, I always find it fascinating when these types of things happen. And I think, you and I were kind of talking a little bit about the internet today and how that has just exposed so much stuff and things are so much different and whatever. And you hear about more things because, we've talked about it before in the podcast, like when Roger Bannister broke the mile record, then all of a sudden more and more people started doing it. So I think since James has started doing his feats, I just think it's kind of opened doors for a lot of people. You start to see more people doing 2 or 3 a year, and I still feel like, I mean, unless you've got your stuff dialed in, which he obviously had to have had, you know what I mean? Like whether it's nutrition, I'm sure the travel was just a nightmare, and I'm sure he had.
I don't think he traveled that much. I think he just kind of did it pretty much in one place.
Oh, see, I didn't even know he was doing it. So that's how disconnected I can be sometimes. But like, I didn't realize it was over. I heard something about it happening, but I mean, just the idea that like, you got to know what you're doing to go into something like that from a fueling and rest and everything kind of recovery perspective more than anything. But like, I think a lot of people are trying to throw 2 to 3 Ironman a year now, or they're starting to mentally get in that spot. And I think it's fine, probably, I don't know. It's just like, I think you have to really kind of up your keep it clean game or something and be just, I mean, it's just like, it's not like the old, I did an Ironman in September and then I forgot about the sport for 3 months and then I'm going to come back and keep doing it. I think if you consistently stay in a pocket where you're pretty decent shape, like we always said, if you're in pretty good 70.3 shape, it shouldn't be that hard to move up to a full. So like if you're constantly in that groove and feeling pretty good about it and haven't wore yourself out completely, then yeah, I don't know, man. I always am kind of fascinated by people that do amazing things, and like you're saying, that like the consistency of 100 days of mentally getting out of bed sore and who knows what else was going on, just to be able to pull that off is it's something that's far, far out of my realm, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the spirit of challenging yourself. And again, like like the physical feat, you could argue when you want to about power walking basically every single marathon distance and drafting behind the bike and using whatever tool like that you can argue every which way you want, and taking IV fluids, which is also not allowed in regular sport. the emotional and mental focus that you have to have, I think, is phenomenal. But I think what he did which was I think probably helped him out a ton, was that he had so many people around him, which I think it's the power of people, right? The power of support via, his, probably hundreds of thousands of supporters online, where he's able to get off the, make it through the run or get updates from his wife and see how many people are cheering him on and kind of living through him vicariously. And like, that fuels people, right? Like that fuels people to do things they wouldn't normally do, or push themselves in ways they wouldn't normally push themselves. But then also like being around people who are, I think I saw someone like flew out, and people like flew out there to participate in doing this distance with them, to support. Like, people can, that's the thing, like going back to the internet, people can carry people to do amazing things and achieve amazing things, but people can also drag people down. Like, that's just like human nature. And now you have access to do something positive with your life via the internet, via a podcast, via a Facebook group, via texting, whatever it is. Like, you have the power to positively influence and affect change in ways that are good. But then you have, on the other end, you also have people who do it in, for not evil, but, bad or negative ways. So I think it's just one of those things where people drive people. And I think that what he did was, again, from an emotional and mental standpoint, is absolutely incredible. And I can't even fathom having to wake up every day and do something like that. Yeah. Also, to not have a job that you can basically like not work for 100 days. And like, that is your job, to train pretty much 15 hours a day, 17 hours a day, and have the support. And before we even get any further, kudos to his wife, right? For going through like that for 100 days and supporting him. Like, I hope she gets like a whole bunch of applause and accolades, because that is basically giving up a third of your year, right? To support your husband and to kind of be on the sidelines cheering and doing that. Kudos to her.
Well, I think the cool part too is the fact that he could do that and can do it. Like, he figured out a way to actually make that his job. And I think that's part of what the beauty of living in this day and age is, a lot of times, is sort of like you can independently create your own lifestyle and sort of just craft it however you want. And here's a guy that's just doing, Ironman, and that's his job. And he's probably doing a hell of a lot better than a lot of pros out there,
For sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's really cool. And I think we had talking a little bit about, man, we're getting some serious thunder.
Yeah,
I
so
hope we don't lose this cast.
Yeah, seriously, because I don't want to start over again. But yeah, if you hear it, we're getting some pretty nasty storms. But you know what? That's us. We'll weather the storm right here in our protected hub and continue recording.
So I just, back to your point about like the encouragement and support and things like that. I think we were talking a little bit about how the internet in a lot of ways is in its infancy, and the way we're communicating on there, we're still kind of trying to figure stuff out and everything like that. And I think we've always kind of came at it from sort of a, let's be positive out there, because it's so easy just to, get trapped in these negative circles in the web and everything like that. And I think we're kind of going through like this hard growth period in a lot of ways, especially with what's been kind of going on in the world about how, we're just trying to figure out how to move through this idea that now we can communicate with anybody at any time. And I think it's just new, and we're still trying to figure it out. So it's important to have like positive influence and things like that. And I think we just need to sort of like relearn to like be a community through the web and things like that. And I think that's kind of at the core of what we've been doing, is like, that's why we always try and encourage in our group. I mean, from the get-go, our Facebook group has been really more of a positive thing than like a snarky kind of like, we don't put up with that really. And we haven't really even like been hardcore on like putting down rules or anything, but I think our community supports it and takes care of it and guides it the right way. And I think that's a good thing. So anyway, all to say, it's a really an inspiring feat that he just completed, and take it how you want and make your own 100 days quest. Not necessarily like 100 days, but I'm just saying create your own lifestyle around what you want to do, because I mean, certainly we've done that,
I think the takeaway maybe to
but it becomes your life too.
Right, right.
So be ready for that.
I think that's I had an athlete that I was emailing back and forth earlier, who kind of wraps up into the maybe where we can go with this podcast, and she suggested like doing doing a podcast, or we do weekly Zoom calls with our team. I hop on Zoom every Wednesday at 1:00, and we do like an hour-long Zoom with athletes. And she suggested doing like balancing life and like profession and stuff like that, because this specific athlete has like a insanely highly intensive, stressful, demanding job with like cybersecurity at like it's the highest level. And as I was responding to her, and I think it's also important to know, like we mentioned this on Monday, like we're not experts, we're not professionals, like, but that I think is why we can also relate to so many people, is because we're still trying to figure this shit out too, right? And a lot of times, like after podcasts or weekly emails that I put out or Zooms, people email or text me like, I feel very triggered by your podcast. Like, were you talking about me today?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like Mike and I generally, like, we're just like you. We're kind of selfish. We're just kind of talking about ourselves. Like, we're just trying to figure out things on the fly. We're very lucky that we get to spend, 2 hours a week, if not more, talking to our best friend. Like, that's a lot. That's probably more than 99% of people do, right? They don't talk. They don't have conversations. They just have, a couple text threads or a Facebook message. Like, that's how people communicate these days, or a couple likes on Instagram. Like, that's how people stay connected these days. So we're always just trying to work things ourselves. But as I was responding with her, and I said, you can, in terms of like, how demanding her job is, I think a lot of people have found themselves in this category. Like, you have a job that you absolutely adore, that you absolutely love, that you absolutely, you wouldn't change it, or it could be one that you don't like, but it pays the bills, and you like having that kind of security. And I told her, I said, the most important thing, and the best way I can help you, because, setting your own boundaries is up to you, but is just to find 15 minutes. Like, I know there's a lot of people that struggle with this. Like, find 15 minutes a day to where you can't be bothered. You're not going to take your phone with you. It's just you, right? Because what's going to happen is you can devote, and this is exactly what I told her, I think almost word for word. I said, you can devote the next 20 years to this job. You can pour your heart, you can pour your soul into everything that you're doing, and you can achieve all these things. You're basically like a superhero that no one's ever going to hear about. And then when you walk away, what are you going to have left, right? What are you going to have left to look back on besides some financial security as you retire? Because the most valuable thing we have in life is what? Is time, right? It's the time that we give. And are you going to be able to look back and think, while I have financial security, I can look back and think that, like, what did I ever do for myself, right? In the last 20 years, because you have a lot of people, and I know work with a lot of athletes who just give, and never do something for themselves, right? And never take time for themselves, because they pour so much in other people. It's so important as just a person, as an athlete, whether you use training. And we saw this last year, right? That's why, while we were shocked to see how many athletes we took on last year as our company grew during a pandemic with no racing, was because people needed that time. People needed 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They needed structure. They needed security. They needed something to do for themselves, because everything else they were doing was for other people, right? It was for their kids who were at home. It was for parents. It was a stressful time. So you have to be able to, and I think it's not so much about setting boundaries. I think it is to an extent, but it's more about just self-love and like self-care, and like what really is going to make you into a better person in all the ways that you want it to be. Not just from a training aspect, from how you want to live life, and not just constructing that way from what you are and who you are as a professional and what you do for a job or for a career, but how you just want to live your life 24 hours a day. You can't always give. It's not selfish, right, to take time for yourself. It's not selfish to say no, right, to other people. Like, no, I can't do this. Say no, I don't want to do that. Because if you always say yes to other people, you're never really going to ever say yes to yourself. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
You know how they say it's like, when you're in a little argument with somebody or whatever, a lot of times it's not really an argument. They just want somebody to listen to them. And I think that's really what we all want. And I think a lot of times, that's why, frankly, this modern way of doing business now is just all through screens and all that kind of stuff. It's just so weird to me, because I find that no matter what, when I'm having conversation with people, and it can be about anything, and you can kind of like I feel like humans are on this planet, and a lot of times we're just trying to figure out what the hell we're doing here. A lot of times, it's like, and we get confused, and we know that, the best way is to keep working hard and move up the ladder and all that kind of crap. When in reality, it's sort of like we just want to kind of communicate with somebody and be understood, or at least listened to, and that sort of thing. Yeah, we want to be heard. So, in a lot of ways, I think that's one of the biggest frustrations I have a lot of times with life, is that it's just like I want more people around, and just like, but not in a threatening way or some way to impress somebody or whatever. And that's why I love when we just sit here and have these conversations, because it is that, we're recording, so there's no interruptions here. We shut the doors basically, and we're just sitting here, and there's no distractions, and there's nothing more powerful than one-on-one communication like that. So, I was just talking. It's funny you mentioned to take 15 minutes or whatever to be with yourself or whatever. 'Cause I had just someone had just emailed me today. It said these hour 30 bike rides are really, really kind of putting a pinch on my time, and I'm like, well, shorten your warm up a little bit, shorten your cool down, get the meat of it, and just stop at 1:15, and then you got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it really is true. And I talked about it before. I had a yoga instructor that said, wake up every day and spend 10 minutes in downward and upward dog, and it may change your day. And there's a lot of truth to that, because it is sort of like, just be with yourself, let things calm down, and then the minute you start dealing with all the other stuff, it doesn't feel as harsh, or it doesn't set you off as quickly, or whatever the case may be.
I think it all comes down to, and this is where I think a lot of athletes, like like going back to talking about the Iron Cowboy thing, is like, when you wake up every day, and obviously we work with such a wide variety of athletes and that are trying to achieve all different kinds of things, but like the hardest thing every athlete we work with is trying to achieve is just like how to navigate life. Like that's coaching, right? It's like, people think it's you sitting, that Mike and I sit in front of our screens for 8 hours a day, 45 hours, 50 hours a week. And like, we just stare at data and analytics, and that's it. Like, that's all it is. But that's like 10% of what we do. The rest is, and I sent an email out to our team, like maybe 2 weeks ago. That's kind of like, here's what it's really like to coach people. And I got like 15 emails back that was like, yeah, this pretty much solidified it. I don't want to be a coach. Like they were like, I don't want any part of, because it's about the soft skills. It's about learning, and like you said, it's about you as a coach. And like I think in the last like few months, as you've picked up so many athletes, I think it's been fun for myself to watch you kind of learn how to absorb life, not your own, but other people's life. Because as a coach, like, you hear all of it. Like, you hear the good, you hear the bad. Just like, this is just a drop in the bucket example of like, today it's only it's 11:40 Eastern time here on a Thursday. So far today, I've had a text from an athlete who's like, I'm super stressed. I've got a new job. I've got to travel. I'm not getting along with my sister, and we have to get our house ready to sell, and I have to move out on the next week. It's going to transfer from this camp to the next camp. 30 minutes later, a phone call with another athlete who is kind of going through like, do I want to race? Do I really not want to race? I have all these family people coming. Do I really want to go? I don't want to disappoint people. What should I do? 30 minutes later, email from another athlete who's like, cybersecurity warfare. It's like, I'm struggling. What do I do? 30 minutes later, another athlete. My mother-in-law just got diagnosed with terminal cancer. My father-in-law can't help. Like, that's coaching. That is what you hear and you deal with. But that's why it's about helping people. You see sometimes and I've seen this for other coaching companies. They actually offer not triathlon coaching. In addition to, they also have life coaching. They offer just straight up life coaching, how to navigate life. And I'm like, maybe we should do that, because that's really 90% of what we do already. It's life coaching with a little bit of triathlon sprinkled in. But that is what we do. It is helping other people and just listening and absorbing, and hopefully just being a very small part of how people navigate life. And it is the one, triathlon is not the one bond that connects us all. From the athletes who work with, the people in this podcast, what connects us all is is life, the relentlessness of life, the fact that life rarely ever decides to sprinkle things, evenly across a year. It dumps, right? It's like, oh, here's a little bit here, here's a little bit here. It's like, here's 5 really, really tough things. Here you go. And here's on a big silver platter. Deal with it, and that's what happens. So we all have this connection. I think we come together through triathlon. We come together through this common theme, which is we like to train, we like to race, we're doing this, but at the core of it, and we always notice this at our camps and at our run camps, especially when we're all like the lodge or we're doing some camps, like the conversations in between never have anything to do with like, wait, where are you racing this year? What are you doing? What's your A race? It's like you talk about life, because that is ultimately what we have. And I think the more support you can have with other people, the more you're going to see your success with racing come to fruition. And it's not, and I don't think there's a great way or a hack, obviously, or a set way to put your life and your boundaries and your balance in order to make sure it's like incredibly successful. It just comes down to effort. But the ultimate thing is like triathlon, can be called a selfish sport, but you have to be selfish with your own time. You have to take time for yourself, because if you don't, I've gone through this. I go through it every year. Like I find myself just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving. And that's usually when I stop training, because I love what I do and I love to give. But at the same time, I'm like, you got to take some time like for yourself. You got to get back into training and do something for yourself, because what you don't want to do is you can help as many people as you possibly want. But if you're not helping yourself, then who are you really helping? Right. And I think that's just a hard conversation we're not all comfortable with, nor are we perfect at doing.
Yeah. A lot of times I don't think we know what we need to, and we have to step away to find it. So I always talk about Ironman, right? Ironman or 70 point. If you have a big race that's, you signed up for a year or two ago or whatever it is, and it's just hitting out. I always call it like the elephant in the room, because we're sort of like, this is fun. I love triathlon. And then at one point, and this is starting to happen, like I know next week is 14 weeks from Wisconsin, 16 weeks from Chattanooga, maybe 20-ish from Florida. We have Augusta. We have a lot of these races that are sitting out there in the fall. And I've had a lot of people kind of contact me about coaching, because it's like, it was kind of like training and we're having fun and everything. And then it's sort of like, I got a lot going on here, and I don't know if I'm doing things the right way all the time, or sometimes it's like, like you're saying, man, I think some people like coaching, and it's just fun to kind of have somebody to kind of joke around with, or lighten up the mood, or kind of like set you, give you some stuff that helps you get through the day, or that somebody that cares, and that's sort of what a lot of it's been lately. Because I think once the true Ironman like base and build starts, and then it starts getting like, oh my God, my time, and I don't know if I'm, I've done this before maybe, but I'm not sure if I'm doing it the right way, or like how do I know, right? So because normally people in your family don't care. They care to a certain degree, or your friends don't really understand it or whatever. But it's always nice to have somebody, a confidant or whatever. But it's just interesting, because I've been noticing that lately with these, when the sands start really flying through that hourglass and it gets closer and closer to race, it's always nice to have somebody kind of in your corner, and I'm feeling it too. I don't really feel it, but I'm just feeling kind of like, all right, I know what I got to do. I got to start doing it. And I've been preaching this idea of like really hitting that midweek structured bike hard. And so
you did it yesterday.
I did, man.
I heard you.
And, you heard me.
I did. I heard you during the Zoom. I almost like did like a well check to make sure you were okay out here.
It was probably my hardest trainer ride in a couple of years, I bet.
I confronted you on that aspect when you got off.
But I'm just saying, it's like it feels good to do that. And, like I said, I've got 16 weeks or whatever, but I think I'm the captain of cramming for exams. So it feels 100%. Good to actually do these things ahead of time, because I was looking at my workout. I was thinking, okay, if I can keep this sort of thing going, who knows, because that's always what we want, right? Is like, we want to execute to what we think our capabilities are. And I think that that's where, having somebody around to kind of help you. And, we've been kind of like silently pushing each other, I think, because I come in and I'm like, damn, there he goes again, or whatever. There's like little water drips coming out of the pool. And, those kind of things are weird little motivators. And I think doing it, you got to have somebody in your life to kind of do that with you. Or
you got to have somebody that's willing to push and pull, right? And you've always been good with that with me. Is you'll be like, you do a very good job of being like, just with it, you're like, dude, you gotta stop. Like, you gotta, because I'm always like, I'm like, I hate using the word addict because I don't, because I think it's got a whole lot of like negative connotation with it. But I mean, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm 8 years sober in November, but so I think I do have obviously like an addictive tendency. And I love to work and I love what I do. And I also am a problem solver. That's just what I do. I can sometimes be like a really horrible listener because all I'm thinking of is like, well, I can fix that. Like I can totally fix that. It's helpful as a coach because like that's what you're doing is you're problem solving and listening, and kind of troubleshooting. But sometimes as a listener, I kind of fall short because as soon as you open your mouth, I'm like, all right, well, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And like sometimes people are like, I don't need you to fix it, I just need you to listen.
I got a PDF for that.
Yeah. I got a PDF. I can, or maybe we can do this. Like maybe we can, or do a camp. And you're always like, dude, you got to stop. You got to slow down. You can't do so much. Like, you're stressing me out. You're stressing me out a little bit. But you also need people to push, right? To challenge you in a way that's healthy and not a way that breaks you one way, not a way that breaks you down, and not a way that breaks you by pushing you too hard. But it's kind of like you said, like silently nudges, right? And it is at least available to push you in a way that has a positive impact, right, on what you're doing. And it's not, because the thing is that anything that you want in life that you want to last long, right, has to be up to you. It can't be because of someone else. Like I've gotten into, I don't want to say arguments or but I will say like heated conversation with athletes before, when I'm like, your motivation is not my job. Like my job isn't to David Goggins you every morning with a YouTube video. That's not my job. Like that's up to you. Because if it was my job, then as soon as I'm gone or I can't do it, then where's your motivation going to come from? Because I don't want it to come from fear, right? I also don't want it to come from, and this is the other conversation, like I'm also not going to give you when you do a workout, you're not going to get, 5 scratch and sniff stickers, sent through on Training Peaks because you did a 30-minute run. Like that's also not my job. Like, because I don't want you to do it because you want the applause or you want the reprimand, right? Because of the fear. I want you to do it because you want to do it, because you love it, because you like it, like, because it's yours. It's not mine. It's yours. It is your racing. It is your training. It is your life. I am but a small piece, and same for you, a small piece of the puzzle that can hopefully help you guide your way to whatever it is you're trying to achieve. Like that is it. You can, and I'm sure there are different coaches that want to be in the spotlight and want all the accolades, but that's not how we roll. It's like, we want our athletes to be successful on their own because we want them to race independently of not wanting, because I've heard athletes before like that we've taken on. They're like, I was scared to disappoint my coach, and that is honestly something that we still have athletes that are like that because that's how they're wired. But like, you're literally never going to disappoint me unless you like dope or something like that, and you do something stupid. Other than that, like we all make mistakes, but other than that, like do your best, and you're not going to disappoint me. Like my relationship with you as a coach isn't based on your performance. It's based on communication, trust, and are you going to invest as much as I'm going to invest? Because I'm going to invest a whole hell of a lot in you. I'm going to invest everything that I can. And all I'm asking is that you invest the same amount, not in me, but in the process. And then most importantly, invest as much as in yourself, right? Invest as much as you can in yourself, not just going through the motions. It shouldn't be, are you a rah-rah coach? I really need a rah-rah coach. I'm not by. You're probably better off someone else. That's just not what we do. Like, I want you to be successful on your own because it teaches you that skill that you need in racing. You have to do it on your own. You have to want to do it because ultimately when you wake up in the morning, the best workouts you can do aren't going to be from fear, right, of failure or fear of letting someone down or the accolades of 14 likes on Strava or because those are few and far between. Those are going to die off. Those aren't sustainable. What is sustainable is just loving what you do, getting ultimate and enjoyment and fulfillment out of it because it's yours. And that is like, I think the good selfish part of the sport, right? That is a good thing that can propel you to be able to achieve and do things and just be generally happier because it's yours. You can own it. It doesn't have to be something that you share. It can just be something that is for yourself, because there are very few things in life anymore that we don't have to share, right? Or that you don't feel compelled to share via social media or with a friend or with your anyone else. Like it's hard to not share. So make it your own, right? And own that. And then I think you'll get more out of it in the end.
Yeah, when you always used to say that about, as a coach watching an athlete and, the idea of like them letting a coach down or something like that, it was always like, because I think when we grow up, we think of coaches in a way, it's sort of this, like I've always talked about as when we were young, they were just like, Bobby Knight type guys, or like push and get the most out. We always think of the highest level and everything like that. But, here at Chattanooga 70.3, when I had quite a few people racing, it was probably my biggest coaching race ever. And as I'm watching the tracker and everything, you can kind of see like, you always want your athletes to do really well. You want them to hit their capability, right? And then I don't know if you know this or if this is how you think, but like when I would see something happening on the course or see a split or two, my first thought was, oh, I bet they're bumming. Because they didn't hit it themselves. It wasn't. So I just made efforts throughout the day to kind of be out on the course and go see them, and say, hey, you're doing, like supportive more so than come on, get your, so it's like, it's their race, man. We're trying to do the best we can to help them reach their potential. And I really have learned a lot through that process of, it's not about being disappointed. It's about wanting to work together and hope that they can achieve what they want to achieve. And so you're like you say, you're kind of, feeling for them versus being disappointed in them or whatever. And then we have other people that were having strong races and, in their mind, I'm like, they got to be super happy, because you can kind of see that. You kind of know what's going to happen out there and you kind of have an idea. And then when you see somebody outperform that, that they're going to be like, whoa, this is like,
and then 10 seconds later, they're going to be like, all right, how do we get better?
Because
it's all short lived, right? Coaching is just, it's short lived, but it is, it's like, but that's what makes it, so fulfilling, that's the investment piece of coaching that is the hardest, but also the most rewarding. As a coach, that I've always found it really, really hard to, when we first started doing this, it was about, can we create training plans? Can we do things where we, don't communicate or do emails and texts? Because most coaching companies is like you have limited email, limited texting, or you're only allowed like once a week. And we just kind of figured like, I can't like not invest. Like I like the investing. I like investing in people. Like that's why I coach. I happen to be, my specialty, I guess, or expertise happens to be triathlon coaching. But my profession, I feel like, overall is investing in people, right? Because I want these people to succeed, because you know what they go through in life. And that's why, like, I'm not, I think you and I talked about this a little bit last week, but a lot of other platforms, right, in all areas of businesses are going over to like artificial intelligence, right? They're going over, and like there's a lot of triathlon platforms that are strictly, AI based, or it's all predictive software. And there's nothing predictive about people from an emotional, mental standpoint. Like you can know their heart rate and their power and their swim pace, but if you don't know them, right, and what they're going on, you won't ever be able to coach them effectively. But that's also why it's the coaching lifespan is so short for most. It's like 18 months, right, before when most people come into the sport and leave from coaching, because it's the investment piece, right, that allows you, I think, to feel so great. Like you said, when you see people succeed, you don't just see their times, you see what they've gone through, you see what especially like the last year, right? That's why I think this year is like going to be one of the more like sensitive years probably for me as a coach, is like, because what all these people went through in the last year and a half. And you want them to not just accomplish like a performance goal, but you want them to just see it all come together and to have something they can hang their hat on and to be happy and to feel fulfilled, or to have something positive come into their life, via triathlon, because the last year and a half has just been so hard that you just see like they deserve a good day. Like you earned it. You worked hard enough. You deserve a good day. And that's why, when you see people cross the tape, you do this like massively, fast forwarded, rewind, I guess, of like the last year of a person's life, not their training. It's not like, oh, well, you look back to their longest ride, their longest run, their best swim, or their greatest workout. It's like you go back through like all the trials and tribulations and obstacles and successes and kids graduating and, spouses getting sick or someone in the family dying or, this happened. And then like you go through all this, and then you see the success when they cross the finish line on race day. And that's what makes it so gratifying. But it's like, I think that's just the piece that we miss. And I think that we could all be reminded of it, is that, life is ultimately, and will not ultimately, it's like, well, life will always be the hardest race we'll ever participate in. And it is in it, like by far, right? And it is the one that binds us together, that we all have this common denominator. That, yes, while triathlon is a piece of it, while racing is a part of it, we can talk bikes or gear or, smart trainers, or like we can have those things. But I think we miss an opportunity each time we don't choose to connect with people in a way that's meaningful outside of just the triathlon, topical conversation that is, what's your A race? What's your A race? What are you training for? I'm just training for this. Like, and that's the extent of it, and that was kind of being the reason, like, we even started this podcast, but way back when it was me and Coach and the Fab Five, like, we had this little thing called triathlon that brought us together. But at the core of it, it's like, there was so much else going on that we just never talked about. We just only talked about racing and timing.
Nonstop.
And then you and I'd get together at, a coffee shop, and, we'd start talking about triathlon for like 3 seconds, kind of like this podcast. And then for the next, 3 hours, we would talk about everything else, in life. And that's what brought us together and brought, obviously, this podcast to you. And that's kind of how every podcast is wired, is there's no... And what we hope, I guess, for it is, going on to the next, 517 is that, until we retire after a podcast 1,000, is that, and that ourselves and that you as a listener, like you use triathlon as a way to meet people or as a way to start a conversation, but that's not the way you end the conversation, right? There's so many wonderful, amazing people we have in our community that you probably don't even know anything about them except for what race they're doing. And that's it. You don't know about their life, but everyone is going through, I can assure you, because I get to hear about it from all of our athletes. Mike does the same. Our other coaches, same thing. It's like, there's so much more to life than racing and training. It's life, and you will do better at life. And if you're doing better at life, you'll do better at training if you have support along the way and you have people that you can communicate, you can talk to, you can open up to, that isn't just about the racing and the training, but it's about the biggest race that we have, which is, this race called life.
And frankly, life can be a grinder, man. It's like, yeah. And then we add triathlon to it, and then it's like we're doubling down on the grinder, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't look at it the right way. And, we talked about my ride yesterday, and I had like kind of a big swim on the schedule after that ride. And I got done with that bike ride, and I was like, F that, man. I'm not doing that. I was just like, my body is not, like, it's not worth it, man. And I think a lot of times, I'm still a big believer of like this idea that I've always used this analogy with, in college, which I was terrible with. If I did the assignment every day or did part of it or stayed with it the whole time and then took the test, I would do a lot better than if I were to like wait, and then cram. So to me, it's just about like, staying in the game, doing the things, for the most part that you need to do. Like I didn't go, completely wipe myself out with a swim last night. And I feel good about it because I'm going to come back today. I'm going to probably, do a little something more towards the right direction and kind of keep a balance because, man, life for me is a beautiful thing, but it can be like when you feel weights constantly coming out of nowhere and getting on both shoulders, and all of a sudden there's different stuff to worry about, with the You know, with me, it's like I had the dog thing. I had to go to the vet yesterday, and like there's all these things, and people are doing. It's like, how do you balance that, and how do you kind of like go through things a little bit lighter and without the urgency weight of everything on it? I just think that, like, man, we just have a tendency to create this quickening and this compounding effect of everything. It's like the more we do, the more we have to do, and then it just never ends. So it's like, when can we step back and like just do enough and do it right, and then just leave it go? And I think that's what, I mean, we're immersed in this. I think that's a lot of times what people, this is our life, the triathlon business, basically. I mean, we kind of come down here every day, and, I think a lot of, coaches in this industry are probably part-time, and it become, but like, it's hard to imagine that we're literally kind of available all the time to deal with, coaching questions or all that kind of stuff. And that's just sort of how it happens here. And that's how we can make it happen, as far as, just being a little bit different, I guess, like, cause I think you're right. That personal touch is really sort of at the core of what we do. And we just can't seem to like just throw things out in the wind and let them, let people on their own.
Yeah, and I think that's that's the greatest way to probably end it. Is like, no matter, and that's one of the things that like the athletes that we work with say, that they get they're more surprised at, in terms of like the biggest benefit of having a coach, is like the removal of so much stress. Like, because life is a grinder, and then you got to try to create your own plan that meets your expectations and move things around, and do I do it or not do it? And I don't care who you go with, or what coaching you get, or who you end up trying to get to help you, but find somebody that's willing to invest in you, right? That cares about what you care about, that's willing to invest in you as a person, as an athlete. You will find, because I know a lot of people are always hesitant to get coaching just because they think they're not good enough, they're not fast enough. We work with everyone, and a lot of coaches. I know a lot of awesome coaches as well that aren't with us that do the same thing. Like they invest in people. Like it changes you when you see and you notice that someone is invested in you, that you have, and that's like one of the very first guests we ever had on was Steve Magnus, and he was like, one of the greatest things about coaching is that good race or bad race, you get to kind of decompress and deal with it all with somebody else, not alone with your thoughts. You can work through it with a partner, with a teammate, with a coach, with whoever it is, because it's about, you shouldn't want to go through life alone, and you shouldn't want to go through triathlon alone. It's not about that. It's about, if you want to, there's that saying, like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that is very much like what the sport is. And it's a sport that, in order to achieve your greatest, you have to be in it for a long period of time. It's not something you can do alone for a very short period of time and expect to see all the results you want to see.
I can't disagree with that, man.
Can't disagree.
No, I mean, yeah, you can have little shining moments, but it's. I was just thinking about I think you've used it before, but the hammer and nail thing is sort of like, if you can be relaxed, and if you ever watch a carpenter hammer a nail, they just like, it's like one stroke, one real smooth stroke. It's just really, but they learned that over years and years and years through, just being able to do it. And I think that to me, that's a really perfect analogy, because of like, if you look at somebody with inexperience with a hammer that's all hyper and everything, like they'll do 15 strokes and then they bend the nail and everything. And I think time and going far together is the way to do it, because I mean, I don't know. It's just, you never get satisfaction out of those spikes in life, I feel like.
Well, that's how most athletes that are self-coached treat themselves, with the blunt end of the hammer. They hammer themselves in a million ways, and it doesn't mean a bent nail. And then they find someone else to pull it out via an injury. Coaching, for the most part, like we rarely, if ever, use the main side of the hammer. We usually always use the flip side, and which is pulling the nail out, which is, preventing you from digging yourself a hole, or trying too hard, or pushing yourself too much and preventing you from making those errors. We use the other end. And I think that's a total myth when people think about just coaching, go back to like the Bobby Knight thing, is you use the other end. Like you as a preventative measure to make sure people don't drive themselves into the ground, because people have just become, we just exist now to drive ourselves in the ground with relationships, with work, with life. It's just how many hours can we work? How much money can we make? How much can we do in each and every day? And that's not what it's about. It's about time. It's about doing things you love and being around people you love. Wrap it up before we lose power. We didn't, and we should have. We should have led this podcast as we have been the last 2 weeks with. Follow us on Instagram at C26_triathlon. We have a lot of awesome. Well, Summer does an awesome job of putting a lot of things on there. Mike and I don't touch it anymore, thank God. It's a great way to keep up to speed on all the things that we're doing within our team and within our community. So follow us there. If you're on Instagram, you can follow us on Facebook. Crushing Iron is the group that we're in. And for all things C26 racing, training, camps, community, you name it, it is there. C26triathlon.com. Our club membership is still ongoing. It's going to be going just forever. It's a 12-month program. If you want more info on that and working around your races with awesome coaches, you can click on the coaching tab, drop down 3, and it's right there. You can also check out the awesome stable of coaches that we have, Mike, myself, Phil, Jessica, Nicole. A lot of awesome people, a lot of different personalities. Pick one, choose from. You'll love it.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Yeah. All right, buddy. Thanks, man.
See you.